It is my duty to inform the House that the Speaker is unavoidably absent. Therefore, in accordance with the statutes, I would ask the Deputy Speaker to please take the chair.
O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name and for the welfare of all our people. Amen. We acknowledge we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory, and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oye Ate, Dene Sioux Lee, Sioux Lene, Nehe Thowag nations. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Please be seated. Good afternoon. We'll just get organized. Routine proceedings, introduction of bills. Committee reports. The Honourable Member for Brandon East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish to present the 5th report of the Standing Committee on Social and Economic Development.
Your Standing Committee on Social and Economic Development presents the following.
Spence. Tabling of reports. Oh, my apologies. The Honourable Member for Brandon East.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Member from Seine River, that the report of the committee be received.
It has been moved, seconded by the Honourable Member member for Brandon East, seconded by the Honourable Member for Seine River, that the report of the committee be received. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed and so ordered. Tabling of reports. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to table a revision to the estimates of expenditure for Manitoba Budget 2022 and accompanying notice.
Good. Okay. Ministerial statements, and I should indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26.2. Would the Honourable Minister of Health please proceed with the statement?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I would like to acknowledge our heroes in paramedicine for the incredible work they do for all Manitobans. From May 22nd to 28th, Manitoba celebrates Paramedic Services Week. The theme of Paramedic Services Week is Faces of Paramedicine, which highlights the specialized roles within the paramedic profession. In many cases, paramedics are the first contact that patients have in their healthcare journey. You provide life-saving assistance in medical emergencies and have an indisputably important role in healthcare. You are the professionals who keep patients calm on the other end of a dispatch call. You are the drivers rushing ambulances through our streets and the pilots careening through our prairie skies. You are the first knock at the door and the first sign of hope for individuals and their families. You have stepped into positions on vaccination teams, in emergency rooms, and on research teams in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. That is why in Budget 2022, we have included a historic investment of $812 million, which demonstrates our government's dedication to support emergency medical services. Within Budget 2022, we purchased 65 new ambulances, which will refresh 1/3 of the province's fleet. Our government is also investing $4 million to hire 35 full-time primary care paramedics and $3.5 million to increase dispatch call bandwidth. Recently, $3.8 million went towards developing new EMS stations in Portage, La Prairie, and Crystal City. Our government will continue to invest and support these heroes who put their health and safety on the line to care for Manitobans. You work selflessly, but it is paramount to recognize how you also require care and compassion. We recognize the immense stress that you face due to emotional calls and challenging workdays. We would like to applaud Shared Health's colleague-to-colleague mental wellness team and their efforts to listen to first responders and help them explore healthy coping mechanisms. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have seen recently the tragic circumstances that our paramedics and first responders are asked to respond to. The tragedies in Texas and Buffalo are both horrific for the loss of life, but also for the toll it takes on emergency responders. I would ask, Mr. Deputy Speaker, after members have responded, for a moment of silence to remember those who have died in mass shootings in recent days and the paramedics and first responders in Manitoba and around the world who are called to save lives and comfort families. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, this Paramedic Services Week, we commend those in paramedicine who dedicate their lives to saving the lives of others. Our paramedics work day in and day out, often at great personal risk, to provide expert care when we need it. Everyone in Manitoba is fortunate to know that when they're in emergency, help is on the way. Unfortunately, after years of PC cuts, this help is taking much too long to arrive. Paramedic arrival times are up to 35% longer in rural Manitoba than they were just a few years ago. In Winnipeg, in January, there was a cumulative 28 hours in which 0 ambulances were available to respond to emergencies. Now, of course, these delays are not the fault of our paramedics. They're the fault of a government that consistently chooses cuts over care. So today, as we thank paramedics for their service, we also pause to acknowledge the burden they're under and the challenges that they face. Recent media reports shift reports shifts as long as 23 hours for paramedics. They need relief and they need our support. In an emergency, every moment matters, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Nobody knows that more than those in healthcare providing emergency medical services. It's about time that the PC government appreciated not only the critical work that paramedics do, but acknowledge the understaffing crisis that continues to make their work exponentially harder. They've been working for over 4 years with an expired contract, and it's long overdue that they got a contract too. That's why, during Paramedic Services Week, the Manitoba NDP reiterates our commitment to invest in paramedics and support their work-life balance while they care for us and Manitobans across the province. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I ask leave to respond to the Minister's statement.
Does the Honourable Member for River Heights have leave to respond to the Minister's statement? Agreed. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, first and foremost, a big thank you to all paramedics in Manitoba. On this week, Paramedic Services Week, and indeed on every week. Paramedics do incredible work, often under very challenging circumstances. This is true for all paramedics, but is particularly true for paramedics working in rural areas, where the longer distances mean more actively involvement in care during transport and sporadic emergency room closures add to the problems. The development of community paramedicine has been positive, but it still has some way to go. For example, there is still no access to community paramedicine in Camperville in spite of the need. There is a province-wide shortage of paramedics which has not been addressed despite the present government having had 7 years to act. Medicine, and in particular paramedicine, is not a static discipline. Treatments and supports, including social supports, are changing all the time. An ongoing continuing education and training is essential to providing optimal help to individuals in difficulty. Training for work in rural areas has additional challenges. There are opportunities to improve, such as enabling quicker handover of patients when paramedics arrive in emergency rooms, and addressing communication gaps for existing communication systems in some rural areas. Better training in handling those who are elderly, especially those who have some level of dementia, is also important, as many who are being transported and require special care are elderly. To sum it up, thank you, thank you, thank you to all paramedics in Manitoba. The work you do every day is essential. We thank you for your ability to be emergency responders in very tragic and difficult circumstances, and we appreciate your efforts. Merci, Miigwech. Thank you.
As per the Minister of Health's request, is there leave for a moment of silence? The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, and I would again reiterate the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26, subsection 2. Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with the statement?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our hydrologic forecasting team has indicated that there is no significant precipitation in the forecast for southern and central Manitoba over the next 3 days. With the exception of the Winnipeg River and the Souris River, all locations north and south of Winnipeg along the Red River are declining slowly, but are expected to remain high until early June, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Water levels in the most drains, creeks, and tributaries are also declining. The Winnipeg River is expecting very high flows, and water levels are significant water volumes upstream of Lake of the Woods and Lac Sully, which is impacting many locations within the Whiteshell Provincial Park. The Winnipeg River is expected to crest in early June, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mandatory evacuations notices have been issued to parts of the Whiteshell area, and some roads have been deemed unsafe, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Manitobans have been advised not to travel into the Whiteshell Provincial Park area. Our provincial staff will continue to identify critical infrastructure within the Whiteshell Provincial Park and develop mitigation plans to ensure continuous operations and provide all necessary flood prevention support. 33 local authorities, 4 Northern Affair communities, 7 First Nation communities, and 1 provincial park has declared state of local emergency, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Our provincial staff will continue to update the Manitoba 511 app with the latest road reopenings information across the province, as well as closures within the Whiteshell Provincial Park. To all provincial staff, municipal officials, and volunteers, we thank you. Our government and Manitobans across the province deem your dedication in fighting this historical flood. We commend you all. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Concordia.
Mr. Speaker, all Manitobans continue to be concerned about the rising water levels in the Whiteshell, and news that there's not much additional that can be done to reduce the flow on the Winnipeg River. Inflow levels are at their highest level since we began recording them in 1907, and there's a lot more water still to come from Ontario. A mandatory evacuation notice is now in effect in the northern portion of the Whiteshell Provincial Park. Manitobans and organizations in the region, including lodges and outfitters, need help now, and we commend all those on the ground who are helping to sandbag and mitigate further damage. But as the crest is still weeks away, they'll also need help rebuilding when the floodwaters recede later this summer. Many are already asking for information on plans for financial support programs for those impacted in the Whiteshell and surrounding areas, including lodges and outfitters, as well as those who have primary and secondary properties. Whiteshell residents and business owners are desperate to know that compensation is on the way as soon as possible. Many Whiteshell residents are also expressing frustration about the lack of warning that they were given about the severity of the situation heading their way. Local resident Amy Vereb told the press yesterday that, quote, "What I'm hearing from local people is just the frustration they're not getting enough help. We're doing the best we can here with our family and friends and the support from the guys across the road. They should have told us, listen, in 2 weeks there's a lot more water coming," end quote. Mr. Speaker, as always, our thanks goes out to the countless provincial staff, firefighters, hydro employees, and of course the volunteers on the ground who are working around the clock to protect lives and property. We look forward to further information from the government on medium and long-term plans for support, rebuilding, and mitigation across the province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I seek leave to speak to the Minister's statement.
Does the member have leave to speak to the Minister's statement? Agreed. The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and a great thanks to everybody who's been working so hard, everybody in the department, as well as people on the ground who've been struggling to keep floodwaters at bay. There have been a number of, this is of course a very large flood that affects communities that often our focus in Winnipeg is Winnipeg, and we're seeing flooding in places which is much worse than usual. I just wanted to touch on a few. There's been St. Pierre-Joly, St. Laurent, Powerview, Pine Falls, and of course the City of Winnipeg. The thing that all three of these have in common, in addition to a total of 15 municipalities, they're all part of the Association de Municipalités Bilingues du Manitoba, who are French-speaking. And I just wanted to flag for the Minister that there's been a lot of stuff that has not been translated on the website, which probably should be. This was an issue that also came up in COVID, where there were emergency situations. People were being asked to vaccinate or ask for help, and there was no French translation. There are many people who live outside of St. Boniface, who live in rural areas, who speak French. But just as an indication, when you click over from the flood information from English to French, the last press release that was put up there was the 16th of April, 2019. So we are well behind, both on and that was in English as well. So if the minister could just communicate and ensure that we're making sure that forms, DFA forms, and that information is being communicated in the language that these communities speak, it'll actually go a long way to helping them out, both in terms of their flood assistance, but also certainly when people are looking to recover. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Member statements. The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We have a very special month ahead in June. After 2 years that included remote learning, hybrid classes, class cohorts, canceled sports, and canceled school trips, young Manitobans this year will celebrate together in person the milestone of high school graduations. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my daughter was part of the class of the first canceled grads in 2020. She and her friends had to deal with the sense of loss and disappointment, as did hundreds of other graduates over the last 2 years. We as MLAs have missed attending the in-person and exciting assemblies that signal the achievements of bright young leaders in our communities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know that I very much look forward to being present at high school graduations this June in my own constituency of Fort Richmond. Schools had to get creative for their graduation ceremonies during the last 2 years, but this year it will be great to see all these young and eager, smiling faces complete an important chapter of their life. I am very happy to join Southeast Collegiate and Fort Richmond Collegiate graduation ceremonies this year, and I know that it will include strong feelings of gratefulness. Like all my colleagues here in the House, we welcome the return to in-person celebrations. I want to congratulate all students graduating in Manitoba this year, including some of our pages within the chamber. Well done. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
1 year ago today, Crystal Musso died. She was 31 years old. Crystal was born in Winnipeg and grew up on the Ebb and Flow First Nation alongside her siblings. She always had an outgoing and bubbly personality and loved spending time with her family. Some of these favorite moments came around a late night bonfire, or perhaps on a Lake Manitoba beach during a hot summer day, or even just yard sailing with her mom, Elaine. Crystal had a sweet tooth and loved to unwind with some gummies or nerds and watch a favorite movie after a long day. Some of her favorite films that she watched most often were The Devil Wears Prada and She's All That. Last spring, Crystal contracted COVID-19 and thereafter required hospitalization. The systems that should have helped her instead failed her, and Crystal ended up passing away as a result. Like all of us, Crystal had dreams for the future. Some of these were pretty humble. She wanted to take a trip to British Columbia. She also hoped to one day watch her 2 daughters graduate from school. Crystal joined her partner, Michael, who passed away a few years earlier. Her daughters are now growing up with their extended family, who are all very close. Crystal's kids today are now 13 and 14 years old. To her 2 girls, your mom did everything for you, and she loved you so very much. To her family, Elaine, Karen, Christy, Renee, Teresa, Agnes, Clifford, and Kevin, you honor Crystal with the work that you do on her behalf. And to Crystal, your family tells me that you were the piece of the puzzle that kept them all together. And to the people of Manitoba, let us never forget who Crystal Musso was.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise today to pay tribute to the International Peace Garden, the only garden in the world that straddles an international boundary, Mr. Deputy Speaker. 90 years ago, in 1932, 50,000 people from Manitoba and North Dakota traveled by foot, by horse, and buggy, and by Model T to pledge and celebrate the everlasting peace between Canada and the United States, Mr. Deputy Speaker. but better place to do it than in a garden, in touch with the natural world and calm of the beauty around us. In 1932, this was only a dream. Today, it's a reality. The International Peace Garden is a mix of beautiful floral gardens nestled in 2,300 acres in the heart of Turtle Mountain. A stream runs through a formal garden where people love to photograph themselves with a foot on each country. There are lakes and trails and wildflowers and waterfalls and one world's finest collection of succulents and cactus in the Conservatory, which is under construction for an expansion. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this summer we will open a children's playground that pays tribute to Indigenous partners. We are working with our further plans with our Indigenous board members to celebrate the fact that in millennia, the Turtle Mountain was a place for First Nations that would gather for peace talks. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have some special guests in the gallery here today, and they're my fellow board members and friends. And in the gallery we have the President Dorothy Dolby, and we have board members Judy Saxby and Charlie Thompson, who's also our capital campaign co-chair. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we invite all Manitobans to come to the garden to celebrate with us on July 30th, the long weekend, IPG's 90th anniversary. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Let's give him a round of applause.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's time for this government to stand up for Manitoba consumers. More measures are needed to prevent catalytic converter thefts. In the past 2 reporting years, in 2020 and 2021, MPI reports a 450% increase in these claims. In 2022, promises to be worse, and many claims actually go unreported. Just a few weeks ago, a seniors block in my riding had their parking lot targeted. Residents in Northeast Winnipeg are reporting catalytic converter thefts even while they shop at Kildonan Place. As long as precious metals like rhodium, palladium, and platinum are worth thousands of dollars an ounce, these thefts will continue. Organized groups of criminals have a shopping list of vehicle types. It's not uncommon for one to fetch up to $800. Manitoba drivers aren't fully protected against these thefts because Manitoba Public Insurance charges a betterment fee. There are ways we can combat catalytic converter theft. I've introduced Bill 232, the Catalytic Converter Identification Act, which would require motor vehicle dealers in the province to mark the vehicle identification number, the VIN number, on the catalytic converters of every vehicle sold by a dealership, including new and used cars. The purpose of the marking or etching would be to identify the catalytic converter to a specific vehicle, something that currently not possible. The provincial government should order MPI to offer substantial discounts to Manitoba drivers who have their catalytic converters engraved with the VIN numbers to incentivize people to get it done. Legislation like Bill 232 would be a meaningful step in catalytic converter theft prevention and one more tool in the fight against thefts occurring across the province. We also need to improve the current bill, Government Bill number 9 legislation before the House by requiring proper documentation and record keeping to be increased to 5 years from the 2 years proposed by
the member's time
government.
has expired. Leave has been denied. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, today I rise to recognize the 30th anniversary of the St. James Assiniboine 55+ Centre. West Winnipeg is the home to one of the highest seniors population in Manitoba. In the fall of 1998, the St. James Assiniboine Senior Centre was in the formative stages, and a public meeting was held at the Deer Lodge Centre. At this meeting, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a steering committee was established to research and develop a plan for the centre that will meet the needs of the growing 55+ populations in St. James. By the fall of 1991, a board of directors had been established and a founding meeting had taken place. Next, they needed to secure a home space the following summer, and a temporary space, a mailing address, would be attained at the St. James Civic Centre. On June 19, 1992, the St. James Assiniboine Senior Centre was officially incorporated. By the fall of 1993, the center had settled at its current location at the Deer Lodge Center and maintains its reputation as an independently operated charitable nonprofit organization that offers a variety of different programs and services that benefit seniors around the community, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Over the past 30 years, the center has evolved into a place where their members have come to see themselves and the location as a second home. Now known as the St. James Assiniboine 55+ Center, they look forward to moving back to the St. James Civic Center once the renovations are completed. In honor of their 30th anniversary, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they've invited you and others and all Manitobans to celebrate with them on June 16th with a 3-course dinner, live entertainment at the Holiday Inn. You can visit them online for more information at stjamescenter.com, as well as celebrating 30 years of outstanding support for seniors in our local community. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also want to recognize Board President Janet Jackman and welcome Sarah Buchan to her new role as Executive Director of the 55+ Center. The efforts of the many volunteers that have made this happen, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Again, I want to congratulate them on 30 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Before proceeding to oral questions, I'd like to draw the attention of all honourable members to the Speaker's Gallery, where we have with us today Mr. Vilhelmer Wium, the Consul General of Iceland in Winnipeg, who arrived this month to commence his diplomatic posting in Manitoba. On behalf of all honourable members, we welcome you here today. I also wish to inform the House this afternoon that one of our pages, Ethan, is serving his last day in the chamber today. Order, please. And I wanted to share some comments with the House. I think Ethan, you wrote this. Am I right? Yeah. Okay, good. Because I was a little confused on the grammar here. So these are Ethan's words, just to make that plain. It has been my honor to serve as a page during this session. From my first day to today, I always have a feeling of excitement, anticipation, and pride when I walk up the grand staircase of this building. It makes me feel like a boss. Having an opportunity like this at my age has been one of the highlights of my life, and it will have a lasting positive impact for my future. I would like to thank my grade 10 geography teacher, Mr. Martin Riley at Miles Mac Collegiate, for referring and inspiring me to apply to this program. I have been very fortunate to have worked with my two bosses, Cam and Dave, and to build a friendship with them, as well as forming relationships with many of our MLAs. Before this opportunity, I have always said that I want to become a doctor. Walking out, I could see myself sitting in one of the blue chairs as an MLA. This will hopefully not be the last time you see Ethan DeBrincat in this chamber. Perhaps, he says, my political journey has just begun. Ethan, we wish you the best, and thank you for your service. And we also welcome Ethan's mom in the gallery as well. Give us a wave. And we also have in the gallery from Poplar Grove School, 8 grade 7 to 9 students under the direction of Darwin Fraze. This group is located in the constituency of the Honourable Member for Dauphin. We welcome you here today. Oral questions. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yesterday, Manitobans, Canadians, and Americans alike had our hearts shattered by the absolute tragedy that unfolded in Uvalde, Texas. The idea that 19 children and 2 teachers could be killed in an act of senseless violence and murder, I think, defies what we want to believe. about human nature, but confirms the fact that we have to respond both by showing outpouring of public support and solidarity with our American relatives, but also in assisting them in putting an end to this senseless gun violence. 9 years ago, I had a chance to visit Uvalde, Texas, when I was doing some reporting on the agricultural industry. I don't know what that gives me the license to say today, other than those are hardworking, blue-collar folks who I don't think are very different from us here in Manitoba. So my heart goes out to them. I do have a question on universities and colleges, but I wanted to put those words on the permanent record.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his comments. What happened to these children in Texas, these 19 children, is absolutely horrific. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a mother myself, I can only imagine what those mothers are going through right now, what the parents are going through, what those family members are going through as a result of this senseless act of violence, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So our hearts and our thoughts and our prayers go out to each one of those family members and to all of those children, which it must have been just horrific to experience that themselves. It's going to be very traumatic for those individuals as well, for those other children. And we pray that they get the help that they need to help them through this, because they would have lost a friend and a loved one as well. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, again, our thoughts and prayers go out to all of those family members and friends and teachers and all of those who were negatively impacted as a result of this senseless act of violence.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Tuition is going up in Manitoba. I'll table the documents which illustrate that college tuition is set to rise $250 this year. Students at universities will be paying some $200 more this year. Now, of course, the Premier and her cabinet didn't tell the people of Manitoba during their budget announcement that tuition was going to get a lot more expensive this year, but here it is in black and white. Tuition is going up at a time of record inflation. Why is the Premier increasing tuition by hundreds of dollars for thousands of students across Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for that question. I think the important thing here is that we are making investments in our post-secondary education, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to ensure that those students get the education that they need in order to enter the workforce, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we will continue to make those investments here in Manitoba. We will continue to also offer student aid for those individuals who need to have access to those education, and they need to have access to the money to ensure that they can afford that. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we'll continue to make those investments in our students.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Premier's decision here means it is going to cost more for Manitobans to go to school to become a nurse, to do a pre-med program, to become an electrician. $250 more per year for those headed to colleges like Red River, about $200 more for those who are enrolling in a university program. At a time of record inflation, where the cost of living just keeps going up and up and up, the PC government is making you pay more. Life is getting more expensive, and that ticket to education that would help empower you and increase your earning potential to respond is now slipping further and further out of reach. Why is the PC government increasing tuition on hardworking families and students across Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition continues to put false information on the record. The fact is that we are spending $33 million more, investing $33 million more in student aid programs for Manitoba students, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's more, not less, like the Leader of the Opposition just put factually incorrect information on the record in this chamber.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
College tuition's going up $250. University tuition's going up $200. I tabled the documents from the ministry that proves it. What is the Premier referring to? It's factual. It's getting more expensive to go to university in Manitoba. I have to point out what was just said on the record simply does not line up with the facts. Looking ahead to the next school year, we know that one of the important dates that educators will circle on their calendars is September 30th. I'd like to ask the Premier directly whether she plans to make Orange Shirt Day a provincial stat holiday in Manitoba this year.
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will refer to the beginning part of the Leader of the Opposition's question, where he continued to go along the lines of putting false information on the record. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the facts of the matter are that we are investing more than $33 million more in student bursaries and aids for those students who really need that help in order to allow them the privilege of going to our post-secondary education institutions, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are also investing more than $20 million more this year in post-secondary education. That's, again, more, not less, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
So we recently marked the one-year anniversary of when the Secwepemc First Nation disclosed some 215 unmarked graves at the site of a former residential school. This house was united in mourning, and this province was brought together over that ensuing year to stand together to advance reconciliation. That meant that last September 30th, we saw an outpouring around Orange Shirt Day far beyond any that we had seen in previous years. Stood with the Premier of the day on some of those occasions. In fact, inviting him to stand beside me in the grand entry of the powwow at St. John's Park. Folks across Manitoba deserve the opportunity to mark this occasion with their families. That could be accomplished by making this a provincial stat holiday. Does the Premier intend to do so in time for this September 30th?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and certainly Orange Shirt Day is a very important day that is already recognized in the province of Manitoba. We are in the process of consulting with First Nations, with Métis, with Inuits, with employers and employees to ensure that we get this right, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I think it's very important that those consultations take place. That is what we're in the process of doing.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Indigenous organizations and leadership are united behind making this a provincial stat holiday. The right thing to do is to make September 30th a provincial stat this year. The reason why it's important for it to be a provincial stat and not just a federal stat holiday is because so many workplaces are provincially regulated. If we want the average worker out there who works in a manufacturing center or works on a shop floor somewhere to be able to mark September 30th with their kids and to learn together about the true history of Canada, it needs to be a provincial statutory holiday. In order for legislation to be passed in time for September 30th of this year to be designated such, we need to pass legislation before the House rises June 1st. On this side of the House, we are prepared to do the right thing. Will the Premier stand with us?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And the fact of the matter is we do recognize how important Orange Shirt Day is in the province of Manitoba. That's why it is recognized by the in provincial government as well, teachers and students also get recognize those days as well, and get that off, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So again, we are moving forward with recognizing this as a very important day in Manitoba, but it's very important to also ensure that we do adequate consultation with First Nations communities, with Métis, with Inuit communities, with businesses, with employees and employers, Mr. Deputy Speaker,
Order.
to ensure that we get this right. We will do the consultation process that is required. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The residents of the Poplar River First Nation are concerned after their barge suffered an explosion and is now out of commission. The barge is the only way that heavier goods such as bulk foods, gas, lumber, and much needed necessities can be transported in and out of the community during these warmer months. Chief Vera Mitchell has called it a crisis, and we agree. They want the provincial government to step up and help solve this issue. Can the minister tell us what they are doing to rectify this situation?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to thank the member for the question. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our department is in talks with the First Nation community to make sure that when it comes to any ferry services that we actually do it right. We make sure that we consult with the First Nation community and work together to make sure that we have solutions and be able to make sure that we do the right thing by looking at replacing with the ferry going forward here, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The barge is the main way Poplar River First Nations commercial fishers transport their catches out of the community to sell in the market. At least 10% of the community of 1,200 residents fish commercially. Without the barge, these community members are worried about how they will make a living. As of today, there is still no timeline for when this situation will be rectified. Can the minister tell us when the community can expect a solution, and when will they have this important transportation hub back in place?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, again, I want to thank the member for the question. And when it comes to First Nation communities, our department is making sure that when it comes to ice roads, when it comes to highways going up to the First Nation communities, that we're always working with the First Nation communities to make sure that the transportation, we know the importance of getting supplies and goods and services into the communities, and the importance of, when it comes to fisheries, to make sure that the income is generated in that community, and that's a priority for our department, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong with a final supplementary.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the barge situation in Poplar River First Nation highlights how precarious the transportation system really is for this community. The community wants to see long-term solutions, such as relocating the airstrip so it can accommodate larger planes, an all-weather road, and a freighting barge system. These measures could make the community more resilient to events such as the barge explosion. The minister could work collaboratively with the community to implement long-term solutions. Can the minister commit to doing that today?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I want to tell the member that when it comes to with our department of Manitoba Transportation Infrastructure, we're here always to make sure that the transportation within communities of First Nation communities are very vital. We make sure that when it comes to investments, we will invest into the communities to make sure whatever form of transportation is necessary for that community to thrive, and we'll continue looking at that and making sure that we work with the First Nation community to come up with solutions, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Flin Flon.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The PC government is attempting to cast a chill over the civil service and their right to engage in the political process. In March, during the Fort White by-election, a directive was issued that public servants participating in political activities must make a conflict of interest declaration, and I'll table a copy of that directive. This is not what is required by law or the government's conflict of interest policy. Why is this government interfering with the rights of workers to participate in the democratic process?
The Honourable Minister of Labour, Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and certainly it is very important to to participate in the election process in Canada. It is everybody's right. We want to make sure that members of the civil service are aware of what they're able to do and make sure that there is no conflict there. This is opposed to when I was in opposition and the then Minister of the Crown of the NDP asked his department to check out the timesheets of individuals that were involved in my campaign, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Flin Flon.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Civil servants have a right to freedom of association, and if they want to attend a nomination meeting or deliver flyers for a political candidate, that should not be any of the government's business. Any directive about declarations is going to have a chilling effect on democratic participation. Will this government, will this minister ensure that public workers are allowed to exercise their rights to participate, as has been the case for quite some time?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it is ensuring those rights that the Public Service Commission has endeavoured to do, to make sure that people know what they can do and how they can involve themselves, where potential conflicts may exist, as opposed to that NDP minister that had a direct conflict and a direct attack on an individual employed by the province that was involved in my campaign, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Order. 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 The Honourable Member for Flin Flon on a final supplementary.
Unfortunate that the minister's answers don't actually answer the question. Workers within the government of Manitoba have the right to volunteer on political campaigns, and this House should be encouraging them. They shouldn't be trying to get even with somebody. When public servants are not at work, it's their business what they do, not that government's, not that minister's. Any directive about declarations will have a chilling effect and limit people's desire and willingness to participate in the democratic process. So, the minister has an opportunity to do the right thing today. I doubt if he will, but will he rescind these directives about the need for conflict?
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Well, the opportunity is there, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we want to make sure that all Manitobans participate in the election process. It's clear how they can do so. Cautions on what might be potential conflicts people need to be aware of, as members opposite need to be aware of. Obviously, the Minister of the NDP government, the Minister of the Crown, didn't care about those conflicts and directly intervened in that election, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to intimidate a member of the Provincial Civil Service. We've cleared that up, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That doesn't happen under our watch. That happened under their watch.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Deputy Speaker. The addictions crisis has taken a toll in Manitoba. Over the last few years, we have shown in this House how rates of bloodborne illnesses are exploding. Defenseless babies are getting congenital syphilis. With proper prenatal care, this could be avoided, and yet the problem is getting much worse. Through Freedom of Information, which I'll table, we found that there were 47 babies born with congenital syphilis last year. What, if anything, is the minister doing to address this crisis?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I appreciate the question coming from the member opposite. Indeed, we have been addressing the growing number of addictions issues that have risen in Manitoba. We have invested over $58.1 million in preventative aspects for mental health addictions, including programs to help prenatal programs identify those who are at risk, and we continue to monitor the situation and address the needs within that community. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas on a supplementary question.
Miigwech, Deputy Speaker. There should be 0 cases of congenital syphilis. That's according to internal documents with the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. But there was not 0 cases. In fact, there was 47 here in the province of Manitoba. That's as many cases as there was in all of Canada in 2020. This issue is showing no signs of slowing down. Congenital syphilis is entirely preventable with proper prenatal care. What steps is the minister taking to address this public health crisis?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And again, I'll indicate that we are investing in programs to help with the prenatal aspects. And the member is right. It is concerning to see any babies that are born with congenital preventable illnesses. And our government is determined to address the issue, to speak with the frontline workers, and to implement programs that can help reduce those numbers back to historical lows. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas on a final supplementary.
Miigwech, Deputy Speaker. Half the congenital syphilis cases in all of Canada are happening here in Manitoba. Last year, there were 47 cases of congenital syphilis cases in Manitoba. That's as many cases as there were in the entire country in 2020. This is preventable, Deputy Speaker, and with proper prenatal care, which this government has a responsibility to provide, these cases could be decreased. One concrete step that needs to be taken is they need to hire more public health nurses. The minister needs to tell this House how many public health nurses have been hired this year to address this crisis. Will she do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Always a pleasure to rise in the House to talk about our government's commitment and investments in nurses. Again, $19.5 million to increase nursing seats across our province. Head into an expansion of 400 seats, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We will continue to look across the health system at the needs, whether it's in public health, whether it's in acute care or community, in terms of the needs for nurses, and we will support through record investments as we've done in the past. We will do it in the future. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Deputy Speaker, our frontline health workers deserve to be treated with respect. Unfortunately, it's been reported to us that hundreds of nurses were sent incorrect paychecks and that they're now being forced to pay that money back. Can the minister confirm this, and can she explain what our government is doing to ensure that this doesn't happen again?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member for Union Station for bringing this matter forward. I would welcome the opportunity to receive that information in my department, and we will have the various regions or health facilities look into the matter. I'd be pleased to take that forward.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a supplementary question.
Deputy Speaker, frontline health workers deserve our respect and they deserve our support. It was Nurse Appreciation Week earlier this month. Not only did the PC government not show any appreciation for nurses by way of action, they can't manage simple things like ensuring proper paychecks are given to the nurses who are doing the work on behalf of all Manitoba families. This is going to hurt morale amongst nurses who are already going through incredible challenges as they've endured this terrible crisis in our hospitals. How did this happen, and what is the minister doing to make sure this doesn't happen again?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Again, the member for Union Station continues to put inaccurate information on the record. Our government is committed to nurses, cares about nurses, values and appreciates all their efforts, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is why we were pleased to support the work of Shared Health as well as the negotiators that negotiated a 5-year contract with nurses, and we continue to sit at the table and listen to their concerns and respond, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I look forward to in the next month or so, many convocation ceremonies for nursing, welcoming new nurses to our system and showing them
The Minister's
once again,
time has expired. The Honourable Member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Deputy Speaker, this government froze nurses' wages and mistreated them for years.
Shame.
Improper paychecks is just the latest in a long line of mistakes this government has made. The PCs have broken trust with health workers. Health support workers have now had their wages frozen for years, Deputy Speaker. It's time for a fair deal for all health workers, and that includes all health support staff.
Hear, hear.
They deserve new contracts and top-ups that recognize their service on the front lines of this pandemic. When will this government recognize the service of our frontline health professionals with a new contract and top-up for their service during this pandemic? Will the minister commit to doing so today?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, and that is why we supported the work of Shared Health and the negotiators to ensure that a fair contract was negotiated and finalized for nurses. And now the member for Union Station is asking us to interfere in negotiations that are taking place for healthcare workers and other levels of health professionals within the system. We trust the negotiators. We trust the individuals that are bargaining in good faith on behalf of their members, and we look forward to a fair and equitable contract being negotiated for all of those health professionals. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Every single one of us knows someone whose life has been derailed or lost due to an addiction. Every one of us knows someone whose addiction and intoxication kept them from thinking straight. And as a principle, everyone in this chamber should be able to agree that anyone struggling with addiction is better off if they're being protected from getting sick or dying. That is harm reduction, and those words do not appear at all in the 2022 PC budget. We know people are dying and getting sick from IV needles, and it is a human tragedy for them and a massive cost for our healthcare system. Given the suffering and money we could save, why isn't this government putting prevention and harm reduction at the heart of its addictions and mental health strategy?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I can appreciate the concern in the member's question that he's raised today. We are indeed investing in harm reduction investments here in Manitoba. And just to list a few, $2.8 million for a sobering center in Thompson. We have descheduled naloxone. We've invested $428,000 in Clinic Community's Health Mobile Withdrawal Unit. And that's a pioneering form of community medicine, expanding our detox capabilities and allowing patients to detox while staying in the community. We have a recent partnership with United Way of $4.9 million. We have implemented the Métis CART pilot program that pairs caseworkers and a family mentor and addictions and mental health workers.
The Minister's time has expired. The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're concerned that people are getting sick in Manitoba and this government isn't properly keeping track. IV drug use can cause a heart infection that costs millions of dollars to treat in just one case. We know there are instances where syphilis and other infectious diseases like HIV are being spread through dirty needles, but when we try to check the public health website, there's no reporting, and there hasn't been for 5 years since 2017. I first raised this issue in December 2018, and nothing has been done. This government has a legal responsibility to release reports, but there is nothing but broken links. Where are the reports of outbreaks? Is the government covering them up on purpose, or is this just more negligence?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I know that the member opposite really wants to point out negativity, but there's a lot to celebrate. We are on the path to progress and in an area that really has been neglected for decades previously. Mr. Deputy Speaker, for instance, this year we have increased our budget in mental health for $17.1 million to support our new 5-year roadmap. We also have increased $500,000 to add 6 crisis stabilization unit beds at the Crisis Response Center, an additional $830,000 to support expansion of the Winnipeg RAM clinics and telepsychiatry expansion as well in our mental health field. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd be happy to sit down with the member opposite about some of these
The Minister's time has expired. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yeah, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the failure of the government to engage in harm reduction and establish safe consumption sites to decrease the use of unsafe needles for drug injection is leading to harm and to extra costs and other demands on our healthcare system. For example, a person who gets endocarditis from using an unsafe needle may end up in hospital for months. Establishing a safe consumption site saves dollars. Liberals are so concerned about the government operating a low-quality, high-cost healthcare system that we've asked the Auditor General to audit the extra costs from the government's failure to provide a safe consumption site or sites in Manitoba, as I table. Will the government support our request to the Auditor General?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it really is unfortunate that for decades the mental health field and harm reduction strategies were ignored. Our government is committed to actually addressing the issues at hand. I'd be happy again to sit down with the member opposite and have a further discussion. We are investing in harm reduction strategies here in Manitoba. We are enhancing core services that have been neglected and underfunded for decades. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are going to give hope to Manitobans where it was lacking in the previous NDP government. Thank you.
Order. The Honourable Member for Dawson Trail.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government has expressed our commitment to advancing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action, in part through our criminal justice modernization strategy. Part of this included addressing the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in our justice system. Can the Minister of Justice please share with the House how our government has committed to decreasing the number of youth incarcerated in Manitoba and addressing the overrepresentation of youth?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the member for Dawson Trail, who has a strong heart for families and for all those who need healing. Our government, because of his advocacy and others, was very pleased to partner with MKO and invest $2 million in a healing lodge, a youth healing lodge in Thompson, the first of its kind in Manitoba. This will help to not only keep youth closer to home, but provide them the support that they need when it comes to addictions, mental health, and reduce recidivism. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to thank the Mayor of Thompson, Colleen Smook. I want to thank Grant Chief Settee for his partnership. We are there to work with the people of Thompson to better Thompson, the North, and build a stronger Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Deputy Speaker, childcare centres in Manitoba are saying that bureaucratic red tape is preventing them from distributing daycare subsidies to families in need. Rather than directly cut costs, as is happening in other provinces, this government is forcing parents in childcare centres to determine who is eligible for subsidized care, yet childcare centres and families haven't been given the clear information they need to make those determinations. The result has been mass confusion, with many eligible low-income parents not knowing about the benefits that they're missing out on. Why has the province taken such a failed approach to childcare?
The Honourable Minister for Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Mr.
Deputy Speaker, and I appreciate the question coming from the member opposite on childcare affordability, working with the childcare sector, making sure that we've got a sustainable childcare program right here in Manitoba for more and more and many, many, many years to come and generations to come, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's why we provided $75 million to improve the affordability of childcare through in advance of subsidy payments to facilities. It's too bad that the member opposite is against that. I wanted to put it on the record that he is against subsidized daycare spaces right here in Manitoba, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for St. James on a supplemental question.
Rather than taking responsibility for a failing approach to childcare, the province has effectively offloaded it onto childcare centres and parents. And this has resulted in many eligible parents missing out on subsidies, and it's allowed higher income families to collect the subsidy even though they don't need it. This makes no sense and raises questions about a lack of responsibility that this government seems to have with federal funding. There's been clearly a lack of communication on the province's end. What is this government going to do today to ensure these federal childcare supports are distributed equitably?
The Honourable Minister for Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to put some facts on the record, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was great to be joined by the Prime Minister, the Premier, Minister Gould from the federal government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to announce the fact that we are taking subsidized childcare spaces here in Manitoba from 6,000 to 18,000 subsidized spaces, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it's unfortunate that the member across, the member for St. James, had voted against the budget. It's unfortunate, but he's putting it on the record today that he's against subsidies going to those families that need it, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for St. James on a final supplementary.
If the minister spoke with even a single childcare centre, he would know that what I'm bringing forward here today is important and that his government should be paying attention to it. A CCPA report shows that Manitoba will miss its federal fee targets by hundreds of dollars this year. The province's confusing subsidy approach is clearly part of the reason why. Many eligible parents are missing out on hundreds, if not thousands, in childcare supports, while at the same time, many who shouldn't be receiving it are receiving it. Rather than directly cutting costs, they've put responsibility on childcare centres and parents, and that's completely counterintuitive. Why has the province offloaded responsibility to childcare centres and parents?
The Honourable Minister for Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's interesting that the member stands up today and is asking myself and our government to interfere with the boards of childcare centres.
Wow.
I know that the member from St. John's is wanting interference with the board of childcare centres, but it's unfortunate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because the fact is that Manitoba has had low subsidized childcare spaces already, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're going to make it even lower. We're taking it to $10 a day, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Matter of fact, even the federal minister, Minister Gould, who is a Liberal, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is even commending the great work that Manitoba is doing, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm not going to take any lessons from the members opposite.
The minister's time has expired. The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In 2017, CEO Michael Schlater donated $2 million to a program for children with epilepsy, and part of this money was to purchase a robotic stereotatic assistant machine, commonly known as ROSA. ROSA machines can help those living with epilepsy by providing safer and less invasive surgeries. It changes the lives for children with epilepsy. Yet in the 5 years that have passed since this donation was made, no machine has been purchased. Can the minister tell us why a ROSA machine has not been purchased and when this will be corrected?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. Our government announced a $4 million investment in support of a 4-adult bed epilepsy monitoring unit, which underscores our commitment to improving neurology services in our province. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know they're going to shout me down again. This investment allows the epilepsy monitoring unit, still shouting me down, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to expand to 4 beds from 2, and the purchase of new state-of-the-art monitoring equipment. And I understand from Shared Health that this equipment is being tested. As the members opposite know, we've come through a 2-year pandemic. There have been supply chain disruptions and issues, and we are working on a long-term plan to develop and expand our epilepsy program here.
The minister's time has expired. Order, please. The time for oral questions is over. Petitions. The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Deputy Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. 1. Across the province, many Manitobans continue to struggle with addictions, and the pandemic has led to even more deaths and worsened the ongoing public health crisis of opioid overdoses. 2. 372 Manitobans died from an overdose in 2020, and that's over 1 a day and 87% higher than in 2019. 3. Manitoba is expected to exceed over 400 overdose deaths in 2021, but the data is not publicly available since the last public reporting of opioid deaths was published in 2019. 4. The data for drug overdose deaths from 2020 to 2021 was compiled through media inquiries, and this needs to change. 5. Access to timely data on the harms of drugs helps to inform both government and stakeholders on where to take action and target resources needed in various communities. 6. Manitoba is the only province not providing regular, timely data on the federal government opioid information portal. 7. Manitobans deserve a government that takes the growing drug crisis seriously and will report the data publicly in a timely manner to target actions and allow for accountability. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. To urge the provincial government to enact Bill 217, the Fatalities Inquiries Amendment Act, overdose death reporting, to require the province to publish the number of drug overdose deaths as well as the type of drug on a government website in a timely fashion. And this has been signed by many Manitobans.
Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Since the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban in August of 2021, Afghan citizens and their families have been subjected to persecution and human rights atrocities because of their faith, gender, and former associations with organizations thought to be friendly with the previous government and its allies. This abuse has taken the form of public assaults, kidnappings, and killings. Many Afghans have left or are attempting to leave Afghanistan to find safe refuge in neighboring countries. This undertaking is difficult due to the Taliban's activities and their presence in countries like Pakistan. Many Afghans who are looking to leave Afghanistan and come to Canada are educated and experienced, and as such would prove to be valuable assets to Manitoba considering its current labor shortages and challenges to its economy. Educated Afghans have usually studied for 4 to 6 years in a specific field of study and spent a significant amount of time and money for that education. However, these people still face barriers to obtaining employment in their field of expertise, as Canada has very strict rules regarding the use of that education and experience. Many Afghans are refugees in other countries and are currently jobless, which is an added barrier for them under the current criteria of the Provincial Nominee Program. Some Afghan newcomers who face literacy issues because they came from a non-developed country would benefit from an in-depth informational course to assist them with acclimation into Canadian lifestyles. The Interim Federal Health Program provides limited temporary coverage of health care benefits to refugees who aren't eligible for provincial or territorial health insurance. However, the refugee must apply for discretionary coverage and provide a list of compelling personal circumstances in order to qualify for urgent medical circumstances such as urgent root canals, unanticipated life-threatening and emergency medical conditions. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. 1. To urge the provincial government to work with the federal government to prioritize the evacuation of the immediate and extended family of Afghans who now call Canada home, and to facilitate their coming to Manitoba, including helping Afghan refugees in other countries such as Pakistan. 2. To urge the provincial government to expand the Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program and reevaluate the accreditation of education and jobs to ensure all immigrants and refugees can utilize their skills more easily and readily in Manitoba for work. 3. To urge the provincial government to have fewer rigid criteria for Afghans under the Provincial Nominee Program and have a connection to Manitoba, family members or friends should be a key criteria. To urge the provincial government to enhance adequate acclimation services for newcomers through community-based support programs and increase their health care coverage to meet their urgent health care necessities. Signed by Karen Strong, Karen Gordon, Daniel Oshin, and many other Manitobans.
The Honourable Member for Flin Flon.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba. The background for this petition is as follows. Number 1, on October 26, 2020, a 51-year-old driver was killed when a cement truck overturned on Provincial Road PR 392 just outside the town of Snow Lake, Manitoba. Number 2, the Hud Bay Company will be trucking gold ore in 40-ton B trains from its Lawler deposit into the town of Snow Lake for processing starting next year. Number 3, this large truck traffic will be competing with local vehicle traffic between the turnoff to the Lawler mine on PR 395 and the town of Snow Lake on PR 392. Number 4, similar vehicular traffic already competes with these 40-ton trucks between the turnoff to Lawler at PR 395 and the turnoff to the Stall Lake Mill at PR 393. Number 5, residents of Snow Lake have suggested that the speed limit on PR 392 between Snow Lake and the intersection with Provincial Road PR 393 be lowered from 90 kilometers an hour to 70 kilometers per hour. Number 6, residents also propose that on PR 392 from Berry Bay, Taylor Bay entrance to the Wekusko Falls Park North entrance, speeds be reduced to 70 kilometers an hour. Wekusko Falls Park North entrance to the Helitack Base entrance, speeds be reduced to 50 kilometers an hour. And from the Helitack Base entrance to the entrance of the fish dump, speeds be reduced to 70 kilometers per hour. Number 7, reducing speed limits on dangerous stretches of highways is a simple and effective measure to protect the safety of all drivers. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the Minister of Infrastructure to adopt the proposed speed reductions on Provincial Road 392 set out above, and this petition has been signed by many Manitobans. Thank you.
The honourable member for Elmwood.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background of this petition is as follows. Number one. Getting that half of 30 seconds back.
Order, please. The member for Elmwood is struggling to be heard, I think, and perhaps we could. Thank you. The honourable member for Elmwood.
The spike in catalytic converter thefts occurring across North America has hit Winnipeg. The price of precious metals in catalytic converters like rhodium, palladium, and platinum are worth thousands of dollars an ounce. Scrap metal recyclers have catalytic converters priced to the vehicle, with some catalytic converters worth $800. Number two, organized groups of criminals are climbing under vehicles and cutting catalytic converters, selling them to scrap metal recyclers for cash without any record of these transactions. Number three, catalytic converter thefts cost consumers about $2,000 for each replacement. Manitoba Public Insurance charges a betterment fee for new replacements, so insurance doesn't cover the full cost. Number four, catalytic converters do not have any part number or vehicle identification number, VIN, and the inability to tie a catalytic converter to a specific vehicle is a major enforcement issue. Number five, engraving of a vehicle's VIN on its catalytic converter would be a major deterrent to theft by tying the vehicle to the part and making enforcement possible. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. To urge the provincial government to bring in consumer protection legislation directing Manitoba Public Insurance to initiate credits to Manitobans for engraving vehicle identification numbers on their catalytic converters. And this petition is signed by many, many, many Manitobans.
Are there any more petitions? Grievances? Orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, could you please resolve the House into Committee of Supply?
It has been announced by the Honourable Government House Leader that the House will now resolve into Committee of Supply. Mr. Deputy Speaker, please take the chair. Ready? Okay. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for or of Executive Council. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and we ask the members to please introduce their staff in attendance.
I think it's going to be a few minutes.
Pardon?
I think
Mark? Yeah.
Mark.
That's fine.
They're doing media. No, we can start. Go ahead.
Well, they have to recognize you, so until they recognize you, I think you're.
Yeah, no, we can start. Yeah.
Yeah, the Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to introduce the staff that I have with me today. Mr. Michael Richards, the Deputy Cabinet Secretary, as well as the Deputy Minister for Intergovernmental Relations. And I have Jordan Sisson, my Chief of Staff.
As previously stated, in accordance with Sub-Rule 7716, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to begin with somewhat of an opening comment for this afternoon before I pose that first question. I would like to begin the committee this afternoon by asking about the tragic fire that happened in Pimichigamak Cree Nation earlier this year. Everyone across the province was very moved and very upset at the tragic loss of the young people and members of a family. And I know the Premier traveled up to the community at the time. And as a result, I think there is that shared interest in making sure that we do what we can, that we take the steps to prevent a similar tragedy from occurring again. I have invited some of the members of the family to join us today. We have Orton and Jen Muskego, who are the grandparents on the mom's side of that family. And I should say, for the benefit of the committee, quite often when we have guests, it's like an adversarial situation sometimes. But I just want to assure the committee that this is not being done in a partisan way. I took the opportunity to speak with the Premier beforehand and just to give her the heads up as to sort of the questions that I want to explore here. And we just took a moment to speak with the family as well, just for a few minutes before getting started. And I think all of us across the province, we want to see steps taken to ensure that there's safe housing on reserves across the province, including in Cross Lake, which is the community that we're speaking about here. This is an issue that moved many people, and so we just want to make sure that there continues to be that focus on what we can do to address it. So I did want to begin by talking about the Northern Flood Agreement, which Cross Lake and Pimichigamak is still a party to, and ask about what the province is doing to implement that. But I'm sure the Premier probably would have some comments as well, so maybe I'll just leave it at that for the time being.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank the Leader of the Opposition and welcome our guests in the gallery today, Orton and Jen. It was, pleased to meet you today, and obviously our thoughts and prayers go to you and your family for the horrific tragedy that took place in Pimichigamak Cree Nation, and I just wanted to say I was able to, as the Leader of the Opposition mentioned, I was able to get to the community to visit with members of the family at the time, and just the horrific tragedy that has taken place, and really visit it, myself. It affected not just family members, but indeed an entire community. Certainly what I saw, and the outpouring of love and support for the family members was amazing to see, and just again, just so honored to be there and to offer our condolences in person to the family. And so I'll leave it at that in terms of the comments today. And these are important discussions. And I, again, appreciate the Leader of the Opposition, that this is not a partisan issue. This is one of wanting to ensure that we get services into those communities that are needed, and that we work in all levels of government to ensure that we work towards ensuring those services are there for members of the community when they need them. And so I will leave it at that for now, and I'm happy to take any questions from the Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to, on behalf of our team and, so many people across the province, extend our condolences to the family and let them know that we are not going to forget your loved ones. I wanted to ask about the Northern Flood Agreement in relation to this, because the NFA is an agreement that the province is a party to directly, and also Manitoba Hydro is a party to that agreement as well, along with the Government of Canada. And as a result, even though quite often there's a conversation about on-reserve issues being federal jurisdiction, here with the NFA we have an agreement that brings the province into the fold. So I wanted to ask just a very general question at the outset, which is when it comes to Cross Lake, what is the province doing to implement and to honor the Northern Flood Agreement?
Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to start by saying that we take our obligations under the Northern Flood Agreement very seriously. I know that this issue came up when I visited the community, and I spoke to several individuals there, including the chief, about about Manitoba Hydro as well. I think there was some challenges of maybe meeting with Manitoba Hydro, and so from that meeting, I know we did ensure that I did pass that along, that we obviously need to sit down at the table to to have these discussions further. I think that was that was the issue sort of at the time. I'm happy to go back and follow up with Manitoba Hydro to find out where the status is of those discussions with those communities under the Northern Flood Agreement. I do know that after there were other issues that were brought up there as well, including issues of overcrowding in housing, and so subsequent to my visit to the community, I did speak to our Minister of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations and asked him to send a letter to his federal counterparts, Minister Hadju and Minister Hussein, I believe, and call on them to take immediate action in some of these areas as well. And so that letter did go out, I believe, what's the date on that? Yeah, in February 22nd. So it was somewhat after that, it was just shortly thereafter, shortly after my visit to the community. So those are some of the actions that we have taken, but of course, we take the situation very seriously. We want to work very closely with the communities affected, and we want to work very closely with other levels of government to ensure that we get the services that are needed in these communities.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I can introduce
if you
staff.
could introduce your staff perhaps as well.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so I introduce my Chief of Staff here, Mark Rosner, who is joining us again today. Thank the Premier for the answer to the previous question. We had sent a similar letter to the federal government as well. I'm wondering if the Premier would be able to share the letter with the committee, either by tabling it or as a matter under advisement later on.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yes, I don't have any problem with sharing that with the committee. I believe we'll get some copies. This one has some markings on it. We'll get a clean copy of it and make sure that it's in 3 copies of it as well, and make sure that it's available here. It was also CC'd to Dan Vandell, Grand Chief Arlen Dumas, Grand Chief Garrison Satie, Grand Chief Jerry Daniels, as well as Chief David Monius as well.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yes, thanks for that commitment. And I don't believe that we've received a response to our letter, but I would ask whether the Premier or the Minister have received a response to the letter that their government sent yet.
The Honourable First Minister.
I don't believe that my office has received a response to the letter, but again, we'll double check to see if there was a response in the Department of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
All right, I thank the Premier for that, and thank you also for the recognition, Mr. Chair. I was speaking with Chief Monias about the issue of the Northern Flood Agreement, and I think I'm sharing his words fairly accurately when he says the Northern Flood Agreement is about the eradication of mass poverty in Cross Lake and in other communities. And in speaking with the family and also subsequently to Chief Monias in that conversation, they talk about implementing the Northern Flood Agreement to eradicate mass poverty, specifically around housing and access to water and sewage for the community. So I'm wondering if the Premier will implement the Northern Flood Agreement in a way that addresses those issues of housing and water and sewer services in Cross Lake.
The Honourable First Minister.
So again, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for that question, and I know we're endeavouring to get a copy of the letter that we sent off to the Federal Minister. But in the letter, we did highlight the importance of these very issues that the Leader of the Opposition just mentioned. And I'll just read from the letter, as we're going to table this anyway. The time has come for meaningful action and funding for basic necessities like safe housing, safe potable water, and to support and mobilize Indigenous housing and rapid housing initiatives through home building, adequate water and wastewater infrastructure, fire suppression services, and other health and safety measures. So this is certainly something that we have brought up with the federal government. It's very important that we work collaboratively on those initiatives. And again, I'll endeavor to find out if we received a response. And if not, certainly we'll send a follow-up letter to them as well to follow up on these issues.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I appreciate the response there and the willingness to collaborate with the feds. So just to put a bit of a finer point on it, is the Premier willing to collaborate in the form of addressing housing issues and water issues and sewage issues with the community as part of their obligations under the Northern Flood Agreement?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I mean, I think it's important to recognize that the need for a partnership and taking that kind of approach when it comes to these very important issues to address overcrowding and other issues related to this area. And we're definitely committed to reaching out to the federal government, to working with the federal government in a partnership to address these important issues.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I would like to ask about the same issues on the town side, if you will. And I'm sort of doing air quotes for the town side of Cross Lake there, because you have, I believe, a Northern Affairs community there as well, as they're kind of known. So that would be an area of provincial responsibility. What steps is the province going to take with respect to housing and water and sewer infrastructure when it comes to the quote-unquote town side of Cross Lake?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say I've got three copies of that letter, which I'm happy to table now. And just in response to the Leader of the Opposition's question. I think it's very important that we work very closely with the federal government. We certainly recognize our responsibility when it comes to Northern Affairs communities. And, but we also, I think we need to work very closely with both on, on reserve as well as on the town side as well, and take sort of a whole approach to all of this to ensure it's not sort of one as opposed to the other. It's really looking at both and really developing a strategy that is complementary, I think, to addressing many of the issues of concern, things like basic necessities like safe housing, safe potable water, and to support and mobilize, Indigenous housing and rapid housing initiatives. So I think these are very important issues that we can't look in isolation. I think we need to take, a whole of government approach, which we are working between our different government departments, including, housing, so it will be the Department of Families, including infrastructure, so we'll continue to work on our side and a whole of government approach when it comes to offering these services to those communities. But I think we can't look at it in isolation. We've got to look at it together and ensure that we're also bringing in the federal government as they are, a significant partner in all of this.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, I thank the Premier for the answer to the question there, and also to you, the Chair, for recognizing me again. I just wanted to share some words just for the Premier and her team about the importance of housing on this issue. The family who joins us today have spelled out very clearly the home that we're talking about with respect to this fire was 16 feet by 16 feet. It was a house that was built for to be an isolation unit for COVID-19. So when we're talking about 16 feet, we're talking about the distance between the Premier and I, even less than that right now. And so you imagine a space of that distance squared, and then you put a fridge, you put a stove, you put a mattress in there. 7 people were living in that space at the time of this tragedy. So I share that because when I heard that from the grandfather, it was very striking. Like, it just made the issue of overcrowding and the necessity to have more access to housing, made it very clear, very visible. You can visualize it, and it made it very plain. So I just wanted to share that comment as an illustration for the need, the urgent need for action when it comes to these issues. And the issue of Northern Affairs community, and again, I know the naming has changed with the change in the department, of course, so I guess they're probably Northern Relations communities now. But whether you're in Cross Lake or you're in Norway House, Nelson House, Barons River, many other communities, there is many communities where you have a large First Nation with either a quote-unquote town side or Métis community side not too far away. So I would also just share those comments on the record that we do have these similar dynamics across the province, particularly across northern Manitoba. One of the issues that I think we have, or one of the responses to this issue that we've seen in other jurisdictions has just been the provision of fire detectors or smoke detectors on reserve. I know some provinces have moved in that direction. I'm wondering if that's something the Premier can commit to, a program to provide smoke detectors on reserve across Manitoba.
She's paying more attention than you. She was a village after. I know she was. The Honourable First Minister.
I appreciate the question from the Leader of the Opposition, and certainly that was an issue that came up as well when I was meeting with members of the community and Chief Monius as well. And it is one of those things, it's one of those basic necessities, and that's something that we also brought up with the federal government as well, to ensure that part of safe housing is ensuring that there's adequate smoke detectors in place to ensure that that's all part of providing safe housing, I believe. So this is something that we have brought up with the federal government as well, and is all a part of those discussions, those ongoing discussions that we'll continue to have with the federal government and with the community to ensure that we have the access to that safe housing in the community.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Premier also. I wanted to ask about training, both for firefighters and on the fire prevention side, because certainly we know, well, I just recall, growing up, you'd hear talk of fire plans, what's your fire plan, what's the safety plan? We do that at work quite a bit. There's a safety plan for a building, for example. School, they often do fire drills, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just wondering what sort of provincial programs, maybe we could just start on the prevention side in terms of fire prevention. What sort of provincial programs do we currently have, or might we look at in the near future to prevent fires, both across Manitoba, but also specifically in this instance on reserves in Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I think this is a very important discussion to have and to look into, obviously, what provincial programs or fire prevention programs that are being offered out there. I just don't have that kind of detail with me today in terms of what what some of those programs are, and I think it's an important discussion to have, and would be good, I think, to ask in the Committee of Supply of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations, where they would be, I think, more adequately able to provide the Leader of the Opposition with the answers to those specific programs. But I think it is a very important question, and I think it is something that obviously we will, I'm pretty passionate about wanting to, to help in this situation and to help on these First Nations as well, to ensure that we have, that safety initiatives are offered in those communities when it comes to fire prevention. And so I think that that would be a good question to ask at those departmental estimates, but a very good discussion to have, kind of the overarching, these are some of the things that should be considered when looking at how do we work collaboratively with the federal government, with the community, to ensure that these types of programs are there. And I think that that's an important high-level discussion for us to have.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Premier. I wanted to ask a similar question just with respect to firefighters, and to ask what programs there are about training firefighters, including ones that would There are many firefighting crews across the province, many of them located on First Nations. Many of them are firefighters locally in their community. Others fight forest fires. We have, I guess, 70 some odd firefighters in Whiteshell right now that the Premier and I toured overhead of. So by way of acknowledgement of all those folks and their efforts on all of our behalfs. But I wonder whether one of the things coming out of this isn't maybe more resources and more training opportunities for firefighters to be able to game out the various situations that they may encounter, and therefore be better positioned to respond to the various challenges that might face them. So I want to ask about firefighting training that the province might be undertaking, including that which could be offered on reserves across Manitoba.
The Honourable First Minister.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the questions, an important one, and in fact, I think he'll see the letter that we tabled, and in that letter we did raise fire suppression services that are being offered, and how can the federal government help to ensure that those services are offered on reserve as well, to ensure that the safety of people living on the reserve. So it is, again, something at a high level that we are having discussions about. We would like to see what kind of training. I think these are good questions to ask as well, and we'll continue to work with the federal government and see what kind of programming is being offered elsewhere that could be offered in these communities in Manitoba as well. And so again, we'll continue to have that collaborative approach to all of this and ensure that we have the appropriate training of firefighters on reserve. And again, those are discussions that we're having with the federal government.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I wanted to ask specifically about a technique of responding to a house fire called breaching a house, and wonder whether the province would commit to ensure that training for firefighters in this sort of situation would encompass, whatever training is necessary for a firefighter to be able to breach a house, should that be necessary or appropriate under in a fire.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and again want to thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question. And I believe very passionately in these, in ensuring that these services are offered in these communities. And I will work and do whatever I can with, in a collaborative way with the federal government to ensure that that these services are offered. When it comes to training programs, with in general training programs that are offered with respect to firefighters, it certainly would fall under the Office of the Fire Commissioner, which falls under municipal relations. And so I think, again, I would just, to have a high-level discussion, I think we're in agreement that, that we need to move to ensure that there's more that is offered in terms of the basic necessities in those communities. When it gets into the details of the types of training programs that are being offered, I think that would more appropriately be asked under municipal relations, specifically under what those programs are that are being offered in the Office of the Fire Commissioner.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also thank the Premier. There is a wage and salary inequity for some of these life-saving first responders on reserve. It's my understanding that I guess some of these firefighters, their compensation is just $40 per call. It doesn't matter if they're there for 10 minutes or 10 hours. It's like a lump sum payment, as opposed to how remuneration might exist in other situations. So I was just wondering if the Premier might commit to raising that issue with the federal government and trying to ensure that, again, for these folks who are being asked to step up in times of crisis and, who we're turning to be heroes, if they can have that issue addressed.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, no, I thank the Leader of the Opposition. I don't know. I don't know whether or not that is the case. That's the first I've heard of this, but certainly I have no problem bringing that up as the wide range of issues that we have brought up with the federal government with respect to these basic necessities and the safety within the communities. And certainly when it comes to our firefighters, the incredible work that they do day in and day out to save lives in our communities. And so I just want to thank them, just take this opportunity to thank them for the incredible work that they do. But obviously I have no problem bringing something like this up with the federal government to see whether or not this is the case, and if it is, what the plan is moving forward.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Premier. One of the ideas that came up in conversation with some folks is perhaps a fire hall in the community named in remembrance of those young people who passed away, which I think is a fitting and appropriate tribute. And I'm sure there are many, many considerations that go into the construction of a new fire hall, chief among them being the planning of the First Nation itself and the local leadership's commitment and their priorities for planning in the local community. I'm sure the federal government also has a role, but assuming that there's perhaps an ability to collaborate there, I just wonder whether the Premier would also commit to raising that idea of a new fire hall in response to this tragedy as one of the possible follow-ups here.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition. I think for his question, and I think it's a good idea, frankly, to look at a fire hall for the community, and I'd be honored to pass that along to the federal government and have those discussions with them and call on them for something of that nature, a fire hall in the community itself. And I like the idea of naming it after the individuals who tragically perished as a result of this horrific situation that transpired in that community. And so certainly we'll endeavor to add this to the list of things that we discuss on a regular basis with respect to this, and with our follow-up to the letter as well. We'll add that to the list of things to discuss with them.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Premier as well. So I appreciate the Premier's interaction here with myself, and just trying to bring forward issues on behalf of folks in the community, and by extension on behalf of people across Manitoba. With that in mind, and we've certainly touched on a few issues here, smoke detectors, fire prevention programs, firefighter training, some specific techniques within training, remuneration for those firefighters, the prospect of a new fire hall for the community. I'm wondering if I might ask the Premier whether she'd be willing to put some of these issues in writing to the federal government. The reason why I say that, and I do acknowledge the letter that was tabled, and I do appreciate that, is I think it helps to put a finer point on the issue where the letter does say fire suppression. If we do have perhaps some of these specific points just laid out in a more comprehensive and detailed way, I think that that might help ensure that there is the appropriate follow-up, both not only from the provincial level, but specifically from the federal government here. And then, if nothing else, the family and community at a later date can say, well, you know, these issues were raised to you in black and white in such and such date of 2022. So I just wondered whether the Premier might be willing to entertain putting these issues and questions into writing to the federal government.
The Honourable First Minister.
Certainly follow up with the Minister responsible for these areas and action these items. And perhaps he, you know, in his follow up to this letter, we'll see where it's at and add those items to another list of things to be actioned as well by the federal government.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
I wonder if I might ask the Premier to take it as like a matter under advisement, to undertake to come back to the committee at a later date once that follow-up has happened. So let's say, for instance, just pulling the dates out of the air, let's say that follow-up conversation with the Minister happens a week from now, and the Minister is able to send that piece of writing to the federal government a week thereafter. Would the Premier then commit to coming back as a matter under advisement, just to provide an update, whether, you know, it's an email or a document or something else, just to provide that update later on once there is something to report?
The Honourable First Minister.
I don't really believe that that's required under these circumstances. I believe I've already agreed to follow up, and I'm committed to doing that with our Minister and to following up on the issues that have been discussed today.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Will the Premier commit to following up with the community on these points?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yes.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
And can we be assured that that communication would be in writing? Anything else here?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I think any follow-up letter, obviously, that will go out by the Minister in response to, you know, the issues that have been brought up by the Leader of the Opposition. I mean, that will obviously be CC'd to the individuals who were CC'd before, so the three Grand Chiefs, as well as Chief Monius as well.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
I wondered if we could just ask to recess for 5 minutes. I just wanted to go talk to the guests, and, you know, they have other, you know, commitments today. So just wonder if we could take that recess for 5 or so minutes.
Is it the will of the committee to take a recess for 5 minutes?
The committee is then in recess.
Committee is then in recess. The committee will now resume consideration. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Chair, and thanks to you and the Premier and to everyone else for indulging the recess there. Just wanted to be a decent host and talk to our guests who are going to hit the road soon. So appreciate the back and forth there on that. And certainly will be, I guess, more to come and more to follow up there. I wanted to turn now to some discussion of Manitoba Hydro and just talk about some of the issues with hydro when it comes to, I guess, some of the projects that Hydro has been working on and some of the status of, I guess, the overall picture of the organization. I wanted to begin just by asking what the status is of the Kiosk Generating Station project. Specifically, is it complete and is it all online now?
The Honourable First Minister.
I've been advised that all turbines are installed and operating, but that there's still some construction underway.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks for that. I understand that the turbines all went online on March 7th of this year. Why was there no public press release or announcement around that?
Honourable First Minister.
You know, I think we're getting into maybe a line of questioning here that's either better asked of the Minister of Finance, but I certainly, as a Premier, don't get involved in communication strategies at Manitoba Hydro. I think that's a bit of an overstep. That would be an overstep on my part, getting involved in that area.
The Honourable Official Leader. Leader of the Official Opposition. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition. It's a mouthful.
Nailed it.
Sorry, I nailed it sometimes. Anyway.
Have any new firm export contracts for Manitoba Hydro been signed in 2021 or 2022?
The Honourable Official Leader of the Opposition. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, just to get the phraseology right, as we all endeavor to get our own phraseologies right. New firm contracts to export power by Manitoba Hydro, either were there any new deals in 2021 or new deals in 2022?
The Honourable First Minister.
I think when it comes to issues of this nature and detailed nature when it comes to Manitoba Hydro, I think those questions are best asked of the Minister of Finance, who is also the minister responsible for Manitoba Hydro.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just consider Manitoba Hydro to be so important to our province and to the overall, not only finances of the provincial government, but also to the economy of Manitoba, that the Premier ought to engage with the issue in a substantive fashion. So just returning to the question around the lack of a press release, the Kias generating station might have been the biggest construction project in Manitoba's history. If not absolutely the biggest, then certainly one of the largest construction projects in Manitoba's history. So wouldn't it have made sense to put out a press release, even so that the construction partners and others could hear about this milestone with the turbines coming online?
The Honourable First Minister.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question. Of course, Manitoba Hydro is incredibly important to our province and to the finances as well as our province. But I think the Leader of the Opposition is asking very detailed operational type questions that would be more appropriately asked of the minister responsible, and he can endeavor to get the answers to those questions. I don't think it's appropriate for the Premier to have to get into the detailed operations of Manitoba Hydro. We leave that up to those at Manitoba Hydro to carry those out. So when it comes to press releases or things of that nature, that from Manitoba Hydro, we leave that up to them to do that. But again, I think if we have overarching and high-level discussions on Manitoba Hydro, I'm happy to have those discussions. But when it gets into the detailed operational type issues of Manitoba Hydro, I think those are more appropriately asked in the Minister of Finance's estimates, which I believe will be coming up soon.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
What's the current aggregate value of Manitoba Hydro's firm export contract sales?
The Honourable First Minister.
Numbers at my fingertips right now. Again, I would say that those are questions that are more appropriately asked in the estimates of the Minister of Finance.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Would the Premier like to sell more hydroelectricity to Saskatchewan?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah. You know, the Leader of the Opposition, we are always looking for new customers for Manitoba Hydro, and if he has a line on an interest, an interested party that we could bring forward to Manitoba Hydro, we would be happy to pass that along to Manitoba Hydro. So I certainly appreciate the enthusiasm of the Leader of the Opposition and wanting to find more customers for Manitoba Hydro.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
All right, we're back and engaging substantively on the issues. I would say, yeah, look west, look south, look north. You know, there's many opportunities. We've got certainly Saskatchewan and Alberta who need to decarbonize their electricity supply, and certainly there's a ton of opportunity there. We have the Kivalliq region in the north. Certainly not only a hydro, but also a broadband connection to that region, I think is very promising. We know that we already export power to our American neighbors, but certainly we can always endeavor to explore that and you know, even converse with other jurisdictions as well. So I think there's a ton of good opportunities. When we get into the conversation around export sales, quite often, in addition to having, you know, hydroelectricity, which is clean in terms of the generation, there's also a question about the partnerships with Indigenous communities that led to the generating of that power. So I just wanted to ask about the partnerships around Kiask with the First Nations there. You got the 4 Kiask nations, as they're known. Maybe just at a high level, does the Premier believe that the agreement with those First Nations and Manitoba Hydro to get Kiask done, does she believe that that's fair? Is the agreement fair, or does the agreement need to be revisited in any way?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to start off sort of a higher level here and looking at, we're obviously looking at decarbonization as part of our economic development strategy moving forward. Manitoba Hydro is a significant part of that, an important part of our clean, green, renewable energy here in Manitoba, where there's great opportunities to work in partnership towards that decarbonization for economic development opportunities in Manitoba. And we look at Manitoba Hydro as an important partner in all of that. What I would say is with the Kiosk Cree Nations, with the there's ongoing, I'm sensitive obviously to ongoing negotiations that are continuing to take place, and I think it would be inappropriate at this point in time, Mr. Chair, to intervene in those. Those are ongoing discussions, and so those are important discussions that will continue to take place, and I think it would be inappropriate to intervene in those discussions while as they're ongoing.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the Premier again. Does the Premier intend to direct Manitoba Hydro to file a general rate application this November? And I ask the question given the fact that her predecessor, the member for Steinbach, directed Hydro by order in council to file an application last year.
The Honourable First Minister.
It's not our intention to direct them in filing a rate application.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Can the Premier just explain the rationale for the difference in approach there?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I think it's important to put this into context, and certainly I'm not going to comment on what the previous premier and his decision that would have made when I wasn't around a cabinet table when those decisions were being made. But what I will say that at that time, very different set of circumstances at that time. We now have legislation that provides clarity now on the Public Utilities Board's role in approving hydroelectricity rates. We have a bill before the Manitoba Legislature, now Bill 36, that protects ratepayers and so and provides clarity around the PUB role.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So will Hydro file a general rate application this November?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, I think that question is better asked of the Minister of Finance and his role and responsibility for Manitoba Hydro.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
The finances of Manitoba Hydro have a huge impact on the budget of the provincial government. General rate application, if a rate moves 1% in a certain direction, that can have impacts tens of millions of dollars. Rate application and rate setting process could move the financial picture potentially by hundreds of millions of dollars. And again, that would materially impact the province's budget, both in terms of on the revenue side, but also, in other important aspects as well. So does that mean that the province prepared their budget this year without knowing whether or not there would be a general rate application done by Manitoba Hydro?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, well, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question because it brings about a very important issue, which is the exact reason why we brought forward Bill 36 was to protect ratepayers. So it's 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is the lesser. So that protects Manitoba Hydro from if inflation rises beyond those amounts, and so it's the lesser. And if it's lesser than 5%, that will be the rate. So it protects ratepayers. And so that's exactly why we brought forward Bill 36. And I think the Leader of the Opposition is making the case for the importance of Bill 36. And so I'm hoping that he and his colleagues will support that because it's in the best interest for ratepayers of Manitoba Hydro.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
No, Bill 36 is a bad bill. We will not support it. That's why we delayed it. What the Premier has effectively said, though, given the fact that inflation is running north of 5% right now on an annualized basis, is that there will be a 5% rate increase at Manitoba Hydro this year. That is far in excess of what the long-term rate picture approved by the Public Utilities Board set out. And, I think that's why we need a PUB, and that's why we can't have a Bill 36. A Bill 36 will take away the teeth from the Public Utilities Board, will take away the independence from the Public Utilities Board, and take away their ability to protect Manitobans from another set of PC rate hikes. We know that it was only the Public Utilities Board that prevented Brian Pallister from raising rates by 8%. I think we all remember that. I know Mr. Pallister was talking about 8%, we need 8%, 8%, and the PUB said no, that's absolutely not acceptable, it won't be permitted, and it doesn't match up with the financial picture. Then again, even as Mr. Pallister moved on, we heard the all the same cabinet members who are still around the table today make the case about how we need all these other big PC rate hikes that came in here, brought legislation to circumvent the PUB and increase rates directly through legislation, an unprecedented move. Only political operation in Manitoba history to ever increase rates through that measure. It was a big mistake. It was unnecessary, and it speaks to why Bill 36 is not a good bill, because again, it will undermine the PUB's independence. You would think that for a conservative political organization, they would welcome the PUB, because all the campus conservatives are taught growing up that, you know, if you have a monopoly situation in a given market, that you need an independent regulator or some independent body to protect the consumer from the monopoly power of that organization, right? And so you would think that a right-leaning political operation would embrace the PUB. However, there must be ulterior motives at play as to why the PCs are so intent on taking away the PUB's ability to manage. Even as the cost of living continues to go up and up and up. So that's a cogent analysis, both of, I guess, some of the hypocrisy of modern conservatism and also the failings of Bill 36. Happy to put that on the record. Will Cabinet or Treasury Board approve any general rate application from Hydro prior to it being submitted to the Public Utilities Board? So just curious, as we're talking about the PUB here, will a GRA be approved by the Cabinet or the Treasury Board before it gets submitted to the PUB by Hydro?
The Honourable First Minister.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question. Of course, distorting the history, doesn't change the fact that the PUB has played a significant role in setting the hydro rates, and they will continue to play a significant role to that end. And so, obviously, Bill 36 is before the Manitoba Legislature right now. It continues to bring clarity to the role of the Public Utilities Board. It also protects ratepayers. And so, I will continue to look and call upon the Leader of the Opposition and his colleagues in his NDP caucus to support that bill, because it will protect Manitoba ratepayers.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
So will Cabinet or the Treasury Board approve a general rate application from Hydro before it's submitted to the Public Utilities Board?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, this this brings clarity to the Public Utilities Board and the role, and Cabinet has no role, including Treasury Board has no role in setting rates for Manitoba Hydro. Those are decisions that are made at the Public Utilities Board.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
This was in the BITSA bill last year. Because of the PC's legislative changes in the Budget Implementation and Tax Statutes Amendment Act last year, the PCs wanted to get that, process to go through the Cabinet and the Treasury Board there. So just wanted to see if that's actually what's going to happen if there's a general rate application this year. Do they intend to follow through on what they legislated in BITSA last year, effectively, is the question.
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, to the Leader of the Opposition, the Public Utilities Board is responsible for setting the rates for Manitoba Hydro, not the Cabinet table. And this process is outlined in Bill 36. It's a bill that protects ratepayers of Manitoba Hydro, and so and provides clarity to this very line of questioning, where those decisions reside at the Public Utilities Board, not at the Cabinet table.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yes, and thank goodness we have the Public Utilities Board to prevent, an 8% rate increase like the one Mr. Pallister tried to bring about. But this is a question just to acknowledge, I guess, like the legislative framework that the PC set out in their BITSA bill last year, which is that according to the legislation that they passed last year, that they took it upon themselves at the Cabinet level or the Treasury Board level to approve a general rate application before it gets submitted to the Public Utilities Board. Yes, the Public Utilities Board will be the arbiter of adjudicating the contents of that rate application. But I just wanted to ask the Premier to confirm that it is in fact going to go through Cabinet or Treasury Board approval prior to arriving at the PUB.
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I'm not sure how much more clear I can be on this issue that the Leader of the Opposition is questioning. I've been very clear that there is a process in place right now where the Public Utilities Board sets the rates for Manitoba Hydro. That's not the Cabinet table. Also, it provides more clarity in Bill 36 and protects ratepayers in Bill 36. So I'm not sure why the Leader of the Opposition and his members of the NDP don't want to support that, Mr. Chair. We on this side of the House want to protect ratepayers in Manitoba. We believe in the Public Utilities Board process that exists now and will continue to exist and provide even more clarity around that role with respect to Bill 36. I don't know how much more clear I can be than that, Mr. Chair.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Public Utilities Board as an independent body protects Manitoba ratepayers by virtue of independent interveners and a public hearing process, both of which will be undermined by this government's Bill 36. They're removing the ability of interveners to participate in reality. They're also removing independence from the Public Utilities Board and trying to bring that closer to central government. All of these threaten the PUB's ability to stand up and protect Manitoba ratepayers as they have done these past number of years. You don't have to take our word for it. That's from the Consumers Association. Serious concerns about Bill 36 and what it means for the PUB. But again, the Premier speaking about, I guess, potential laws which are on the table. We know that they capitulated and abandoned their legislative agenda last year. I'd hope that they do the same thing again this year. But they do seem intent on trying to change the PUB and Manitoba Hydro process. So that's why I'm asking about the current process. Right now, were there to be a general rate application, according to the changes that they put under BITSA, they would have to approve that with their cabinet ministers or the Treasury Board process. So I just wanted to ask the Premier to confirm that that's the case right now.
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, we believe in the Public Utilities board's process and setting the rates for Manitoba Hydro. And I think that, that process continues right now and is even enhanced and clarified in Bill 36, which is before the Manitoba Legislature. And again, the Manitoba Hydro rates will continue to be set through the Public Utilities Board's public hearing process. That's all part of this. So I'm not sure, unless the Leader of the Opposition is just trying to fearmonger with Manitobans, but what I will say is that Bill 36 protects the ratepayers from rising inflation costs, Mr. Chair, and it provides clarity around that role of the Public Utilities Board that will continue to have public hearings as part of that process in deciding the rates for Manitoba Hydro. So again, that's where those decisions are appropriately made.
The Leader. Is the mic on? Okay, we are good. Apologies for the interruption. The Leader of the Official Opposition, please go ahead. And I'll reset the clock.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for your indulgence there, Mr. Chair, and I also thank the Premier. So again, the BITSA legislation last year modified the financial, or amended, I should say, to be more technically accurate, amended the Financial Administration Act such that, Manitoba Hydro has to take not only general rate applications, but also capital budgets and other high-level decisions to the Cabinet and to the Treasury Board Secretariat. That's the bill that all the PC members voted in favor of, so I'd hope that they know the contents of what they were voting in favor of. So given that that's the situation, I would like to know what the rate increase is going to be this year that Manitoba Hydro is going to be requesting and that the Cabinet via TB would be asked to approve. What's the rate increase going to be this year?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, the Leader of the Opposition, I guess, is engaging in fear-mongering tactics, and that's fine. He's, that's in his prerogative to go down that line of questioning. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that the Public Utilities Board is a process that we respect. It's in place now, and in fact, Bill 36 provides further enhancements within that bill for that process. These are positive and provides improvements to the Public Utilities Board process, Mr. Chair. And so I think it's important that, to reiterate for Manitobans, to reiterate for the House, that we respect that process. And that process is that the Public Utilities Board decides the rates for Manitoba Hydro, not Cabinet.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to put a finer point on it, so I outlined the changes to the Financial Administration Act that the PC government, including the Premier, ushered in by virtue of the previous Budget Implementation and Tax Statutes Amendment Act. And just to put a finer point on the fact that, you know, they legislated for themselves to be the arbiter at Cabinet and Treasury Board for Manitoba Hydro to have to go through them before filing a general rate application with the Public Utilities Board. Not only is that reflected in the statutes of Manitoba, where anyone to go read the laws governing this and the bills passed in the House, they would find that this is accurate information. Just to put a finer point on it, I'm looking at a flow chart, if you will, listing the steps that Manitoba Hydro has to go through. And the first step is to get Cabinet sign-off. The second step is to get Treasury Board sign-off. And when you look at this, what's interesting is it's not only about rate applications, it actually goes further to capital projects, capital budgets. It even talks about approving public communications at Cabinet and at Treasury Board. You may recall that this discussion on Manitoba Hydro began with a simple question about why was there no press release on Kiosk coming online. Manitoba Hydro's internal documents say that they would have had to seek Cabinet and Treasury Board approval for any comms decision, especially one involving Kiosk, potentially the greatest, or one of the biggest, I should say, construction projects in the history of Manitoba. Similarly, Manitoba Hydro is going to seek to make a general rate application. They will have to, according to their own internal process, their own internal document, they will first have to seek Cabinet approval. And then they'll have to seek sign-off from the Treasury Board. Given the magnitude of the financial picture that we're talking about here, given the impact on the provincial budget, not to mention the impact that it'll have on the average Manitoban who has to pay a hydro bill, I would assume that these conversations are already well underway. So I would ask again, what is the rate increase going to be this year that Manitoba Hydro asks for?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I'm just curious as to, what the Leader of the Opposition is, he continues to go down this line of questioning. I've continued to be quite clear, and I'll continue to be clear, that the rates for Manitoba Hydro are set at the Public Utilities Board. They are not set at Cabinet. So I've said that several times now. There is a process that's in place now with the Public Utilities Board, and we respect that process. And again, the Bill 36 actually enhances and further clarifies the role of the Public Utilities Board. And so, again, that's where those decisions are made. And again, Bill 36 actually protects ratepayers, Mr. Chair. And I think it's important that Manitobans know that, and that the Leader of the Opposition and the rest of his NDP party are holding up that bill, which protects Manitoba Hydro ratepayers. So I'm not sure why he's going down this line of questioning. I'm not sure what he's trying to fabricate as a result of this, Mr. Deputy Speaker and Mr. Chair. But what I will say is that, I have said it before, and I'll say it again. Those decisions on the rates, for setting the rates for Manitoba Hydro, are made at the Public Utilities Board.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we all recognize that the Premier is deliberately trying to misconstrue the question to evade what is pretty straightforward, right? I've posed the question a few times. What is the rate increase going to be that Manitoba Hydro is going to ask for? And instead, the Premier seeks to answer a question in a different way, but obviously she could choose to answer the question by telling us what, in fact, Manitoba Hydro is going to bring forward in terms of the rate increase request. I did want to pause for a second just to point out why we are going to delay Bill 36, why we have done so, why we will continue to do so, because it might actually save Manitobans a few $100s this year. If we were to allow Bill 36 to pass on June 1st, we would be locked into a situation where the rate increase is either going to be 5% or it's going to be above 7%, which is the annualized rate of inflation in Manitoba right now. So again, the PCs are in a rush to pass Bill 36. They think it's a great idea. Passing Bill 36 in June would guarantee a rate increase this year of between 5 and 7% in Manitoba. That's way too much money. People are struggling right now. People are getting hit every time they go to the gas station with the higher gas bill. Every time they go to the grocery store, they're getting hit with a higher grocery bill. Our team delaying Bill 36 past June 1st means we hold open the possibility that we could have perhaps a more affordable result from the Public Utilities Board. Again, we know the long-term approvals that the Public Utilities Board laid out for the decade that we're currently in was talking about, 3%, 3.5%. Why would we abandon something that's been done all above board and that's been done in the public eye? Why would we abandon that, the numbers that we're talking about in that neighborhood, and instead guarantee that we increase hydro bills on the people of Manitoba by 5% to 7%? As a political proposition, why would you want to go to the doorstep and say, we guaranteed that we're going to increase your hydro bill by 5% to 7% this year? I like our message. We don't want your hydro bill to go up. I think that's a good message. We don't want your hydro bill to go up. PCs, I'm sure, have invested a lot of time in doing focus groups and testing the message, but at the end of the day, you're going to try and sell Manitobans on 5 to 7% increases on hydro bills? Okay. Our message is more simple. It's simpler. We don't want your hydro bill to go up, and we're fighting for that. I'm looking at a document here that says that not only does Manitoba Hydro present their budget to the Treasury Board, that they then adjust their budget based on the feedback from the Treasury Board Secretariat. So it's pretty well understood on the Manitoba Hydro side of the equation that it is the Cabinet and the Treasury Board who are going to be the ones who decide how much to raise rates on Manitobans by. It is pretty clear understanding on the Manitoba Hydro side that it is going to be the Cabinet ministers who are saying raise the bills on Manitobans by 5%, or perhaps no, raise it by 7%. That's going to be the direction coming from the Cabinet. Manitoba Hydro, they've got no issue with it. They're not the ones who have to come into the committee, I guess, and say this directly to the people of Manitoba. So when in their own internal documents, they've got no hesitation putting it in black and white. We're going to bring our Manitoba Hydro budget to the Provincial Treasury Board Secretariat, and then we are going to adjust our budget at Manitoba Hydro based on feedback.
The time being 5 p.m., committee rise, call on the Speaker.
Wait for the staff to leave first. On both sides.
The hour being 5 p.m., the House is adjourned and stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.